Hi everyone, back again with the sound design, I guess we'd call it, on the JDXI. And this time we're going to do the analog synth, which if you find an init tone, just by going into program, and just find an init program anywhere in the G's, hit the analog synth part and you'll get just an init tone, which is just a sawtooth waveform. I think the filter is fully open, resonance is down, and anyway, let's have a look at what it actually is. So back on the computer, we're going to launch the analog synth, and we'll go full screen on this. Now, I don't know if you saw the drum one I did earlier. This has a lot less complexity about it. I mean, pretty much an analog synth. This is a mono synth. It's got the oscillator section, the LFO, the filter, and the amp, and it's actually laid out pretty similar to your standard sort of Moog layout. But what it actually does do is it opens up more features of the analog synth than what you can actually see on the actual physical synthesizer. And one of the bugbears, I'm having a shocker today. One of the bugbears I have with this synth is the lack of ADSR or envelope control. It's just got this real basic kind of, well, Roland called it a envelope performance knob. I can't really get to some of the places that I like to get to with this knob. I think it's limited. It does have some functionality, but there's so much wasted space here. They could have easily have put some sliders in. I mean, this is a boutique, and here's the envelope here on the boutique. It's got the 4 knobs. Look how much space that takes up. You could easily have fit something like that on there. What would have been better probably is a slider type envelope. This boutique's got one. I mean, that little space there, you could easily fit that in there. Roland, when you're designing your synths, please don't skimp on really important features. Anyway, enough rant. So, oscillator section. I did a video a few weeks back on this editor as an overview, and you probably would have seen me go through this part of it. One thing I like about it is when you do select your waveforms on the software, it changes the light here. You can see I'm not touching any buttons. Move my hand out of the way, and I'm changing it on the software. I like that. There's an instantaneous feedback visual on the synth. Also the same with the sub oscillator, it changes the light. You can see that it turns on and it blinks when it's on octave 2 or octave -2. So what I want to probably do now is I want to read from the synth and get this basic analog tone, and I'm going to study what they've done. So the init tone has a sawtooth wave, just as we thought, full filter, no resonance, everything is set to 0 on the key follow. The filter envelope is no attack, no decay, full sustain, and no release. That's why you get that. No envelope depth or velocity sensitivity. The amplifier level is all the way to the top, and no key follow on any of the amp envelopes. So the amp envelope is exactly the same as the filter envelope. And yeah, there's some things that people would notice on here. For example, the portamento time is set to a default of 20. So pitch bend, just 2 semitones. Let's go all the way. Well, you can actually set the pitch bend to be up and down different levels. That's actually really cool. So that's all the way up, all the way down. And you can set it to, let's do half down and full up. Or let's do it the opposite. Let's do all the way down, which is 2 octaves, and then 1 octave up. So there you go, that's pretty cool. But that's not really sound design, is it? It's more performance design. So let's concentrate more on the sound design. And an analog synth, there's really not a lot we can do in terms of fancy digital stuff in here, which is great because that actually shows us that this is a true analog synth under the hood here. So let's grab something cool. All right, I'm going to go with a square wave, and I'm going to give it some pulse width. And I'm going to give it some modulation depth. Now I can change that modulation depth on the pulse width by adjusting the LFO. So for example, at the moment it's at 53. We can go right up. So I like that, and I actually really want a bit of a release on this. So let's go half a release. So about there. And a bit of an attack. So let's do like a quarter of an attack. Now let's do the same for the filter. So let's make sure the filter is kind of replicating our envelope a little bit here. Preciseness doesn't really matter. The next thing we want to do is we want to get this filter happening a little bit for us. By the way, this filter is analog. It actually says it on the synth if you didn't know that. But you can actually turn that off. And you can not have a filter at all. Give a bit of resonance. Now, I want the envelope to affect the filter. I think I probably want a bit more attack on that. It's a bit, sometimes I don't like attacks to be too immediate. I like it to sort of lump a bit into the attack. There's a slight delay on that attack, which I like. Okay. Reverse envelope there. Just sometimes subtlety, like that's only -2. And that's nice. Notice too that portamento wasn't on before when I was mucking around with it, so now I've turned it on and it actually works. Nice. Now I'm just fiddling with the synth itself. Notice too, sometimes a little bit of pitch depth gives it a bit of a sickly sound, like the synth is old and it's getting, you know, the electronics in it are old in it. Okay, let's add a sub oscillator to this. So yeah, I probably won't touch that pitch envelope as much. Let's try and get that back to 0. And obviously one of the cool things about this analog synth is you can add digital effects. And how cool now does this sound? Yeah, it's nothing really special about this sound, but there's not a huge amount really we can do with this editor. A lot of the features are here on the synth, but there are some things hidden behind, like tempo sync on the LFO. That's actually pretty handy if you want the LFO to match the tempo. So let's change that. It's at 1/16. Let's change that to 1/8 or 1/4. Let's go really fast. Let's go 1/32. So that's actually LFO synced to the tempo, which is really cool. Legato is not on. Let's turn it on. Oh, we probably need to save this. If we like this, let's save it. Let's call it sound design analog S pitch for sample on hold, because it's kind of a sample and holdy sound. Now, if I change this tone here, I've lost that because it's in the buffer edit. So we can just reload it again by clicking open, go back in. There it is, back again. Or we can change back to toxic bass. Now what I was going to say is there's a lot of patches in here that Roland have already given us, and these are good starting points. So say for example, you like one of these. And you want to see how they did it. Click on this read from button here and you can see all the settings that analog sound has. So it's actually a good learning place for you if you're not really that familiar with analog synths. And find a tone that you like, you know. So already, I haven't loaded that one on the screen yet, but I can tell from that we've got a, well, you can even see it on the screen. I've got a sub oscillator, I've got a sawtooth oscillator, and I can hear a bit of portamento. So let's have a look. Let's read it. Are we right? Portamento's on, yes. Sub oscillator, yes. Sawtooth oscillator, yes. So just play with this, learn to hear what you're hearing, and then it'll make sound design better for you. I mean, that is so close to sounding like an SH-101, it's not funny. Let's get some delay on that. Oh, that sounds lovely. I just love that sound. It's so pure and innocent. Like it needs to be unleashed into some sort of crazy effect land, like. Let's get some arpeggio happening. Alright, now that's playing with the controls on the synth. That's playing with the controls on the synth. Let's do it with playing with the controls on the computer and see if we can get real-time sounds. And the answer is yes, that's beautiful. So that's telling me that the JDXI can also be controlled by a MIDI controller as well. So this software is making use of that. Well guys, I think that's probably enough for this analog section. It's a pretty small section. We don't really need to go into massive detail. I've given you some scope. This is here. If you're not doing it, play with your analog synth more. It's fun.